the Vancouver Canucks will be inducting Roberto Luongo to their Ring of Honor. The Ring of Honor, for those who are not familiar, the Vancouver Canucks have retired some jersey numbers, but they've also created a display for the players who are, I guess, you would consider them pretty good. Definitely like beloved players, but definitely not worthy of like a jersey retirement.
But worthy of being honored.
Worthy of being honored, right? Many teams probably have a literal wall like in their concourse or something for players like this. The Canucks have an actual display. Pat Quinn is in this Ring of Honor because you can't really retire, obviously, a coach's number, but you know he's a Hall of Fame coach, and he's probably the most highly regarded coach in Canucks franchise history.
Matthias Ohlund.
Matthias Ohlund is up there, I believe.
Kurtenbach, isn't it?
Orland Kurtenbach, I think, is up there. Kirk McLean, Alex Burrows. You know, these are guys. These are like classic Canucks, and I say that because the team is loaded with the franchise history is loaded with players who are like, oh, we love that guy. Harold Snepps, I think, is up there too. Snepps was like a beloved Canuck. Like he was a Canuck for like I believe over a decade. He had the Fu Manchu mustache. He was a pretty good like two-way defenseman, I think, in his prime. Not like a special player like in terms of like his skills and his gifts, but just your classic like the team is mediocre and this guy everyone loves Harold Snepps. That's classic Canucks for like most of their existence. They've retired the jerseys of Stan Smyl, Trevor Linden, Marcus Naslund, the Sedin twins, and Wayne McKee, who tragically passed away.
Pavel Bure.
Did I actually miss Pavel Bure? I thought I said it.
Oh, maybe you did.
You know, I think I forgot.
It was 10 years ago yesterday.
Pavel Bure might be, and I should emphasize, Bure's up there as well, and it's probably, like, I mean, that man is pound for pound, probably the best, like, the most skilled Canuck ever. Game for game, pound for pound, whatever. Anyway, so the Canucks are not retiring Roberto Luongo's jersey. This is met with, I want to call it a polarizing response if you look online. I have in my recent years spent a lot of time on Reddit. I actually deleted the Reddit app recently because it's such a time suck, and I got sick of Redditors who are always like, well, I know, like they're so snarky. I don't know. It's a strange online place. YouTubers are like the scum of the earth. Instagram people can be as well, and then Reddit is like it's like a room full of people who all think they're smelling their own farts. Yeah, that's a great way to describe it. I just it was refreshing like 6 years ago, and now I'm just kind of exhausted with it. And I found there was a lot of positive reception to the idea of Ring of Honor over the jersey retirement. There's a number of reasons that people feel this way. He was never really a Canuck. He was always a Florida Panther. That's a really common one. That's probably the most common one.
And he did play more games for Florida.
It's true. Absolutely true. He spent the majority of his career in Florida. In Vancouver, though, the man... It cannot be emphasized enough that this is the best goalie in franchise history by a wide margin. People wax romantic, or poetic rather, about Kirk McLean, who for a few years was legitimately an excellent goalie. He was a Vezina finalist, I think, once.
I didn't know that.
He did. I think in 92 or 93, he was actually one of the better goalies in the NHL for the season. Yeah. But generally speaking, over the course of his career, he was an average to sometimes below average goalie, especially like in his later years where... You know, before people were paying close attention to the important goalie stats like save percentage, Kirk McLean lingered in the league a little longer than he would have today. We're talking like 25 goals saved below average type thing. And, you know, not uncommon for the time. There's a lot of goalies that stuck around because you just want that guy. Oh, that guy's like a solid goalie. And meanwhile, the stats are like speaking. Yeah, and the stats are like speaking for themselves against them, right? But anyway, I don't want to crap on Kirk McLean. He had a solid career, and again, he is one of the faces of that 94 final run as well.
But the reason you bring up Kirk McLean specifically is
number
because...
one. He's number one. That's his number.
You think he's number one?
No, but he has his jersey number is number one. So retiring Luongo's number, but what does that do about McLean's legacy? I'm sitting here just like, McLean... super nice guy. I got his autograph once. He has a lot of patience for fans. He attends a lot of like Canucks alumni stuff over the years. Really great personality. Seems like a very charitable individual. Just like, has a lot of patience, a lot of time for the fans. not a great goalie though. Like, was good for a few years. Was technically a stable presence in net for the Canucks, a franchise that doesn't have a long history of that outside of like Roberto Luongo. Demko's obviously very good. He needs to do what he's doing now for like 6 more years to be held with Luongo. And there might be some people who actually disagree with me on that. Like some people, I think, maybe before last year to convince themselves that Demko is like the savior. I think he's excellent, but he's got a lot of ground to cover. Luongo also failed to win Game 7 of the 2011 Stanley Cup Final, which I think is the real reason people don't want his number retired. I believe, this is anecdotal, of course. This is my opinion. This is a biased opinion. I want to say that very clearly. Yeah, this is not a purely objective stance. Like the stats, I think do speak for themselves, but I understand that when you retire a number, you have to take it more into account. I think some people think that he wanted nothing to do with the city of Vancouver or something during his time, which is, I'm sure that's why he signed a 12-year contract here, which is another thing, ironically, that people hold against his legacy, right? Whatever. He wouldn't go into LTIR when he was on the Panthers, and as a result, the Canucks were punished in the cap, which I personally blame the NHL for, as opposed to Roberto Luongo.
Sure. Same.
Luongo signed the contract, but under the idea that it was a legal contract at the time, and then the league was like, well, it's actually not anymore, and you will be punished if he retires early. I think they'll withhold this information. They don't like that he didn't get the job done, and he's held responsible for it. I think that's what it boils down to, is that I think a lot of people feel that he wrecked it, and
in 2011.
Here's
a question I have, and I'm an outsider looking in.
I was going to ask you some questions.
Here's a question about that. My immediate response: 2011, Luongo doesn't win Game 7. How many goals did Sedin score in Game 7?
None.
How many goals did Alex Burrows or Ryan Kessler or anyone else on the Canucks score in Game 7?
0.
So they got shut out in Game 7 of the Cup Final. Luongo did allow 3 goals.
Yeah.
He could have allowed 1 goal. He could have stood in his head except for 1 goal, and they would have lost. So if you're looking to point the finger, and hey, I'm not looking. This is maybe a great opportunity for me to, reopen old wounds for Hunter.
No. I was already thinking about all this.
Scored 8 goals in 7 games.
Yeah. And
you're gonna blame the goaltender?
Luongo had 2 shutouts.
He had 2 shutouts. Your team scored 8 goals. I mean. Yeah. You're going to point the finger at the goaltender? Okay, I mean, do that if you want, I guess. But it just seems kind of absurd when... Yeah, he had some stinkers. Really bad games.
Yeah.
And then he had... he was great in the other 4 games.
He was great in the other 3. In Game 7 wasn't great. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say that Luongo did really put in, the best game of his career in spite of the loss. It's not like he gave up, total softies, but there's some plays we just needed saves on in that game for sure. But the only game I really hold him responsible for, that I would say this one's on Luongo, is Game 6. I'd say Game 6. Game 3 was 8-1. The Canucks scored in the third period. I think it was 8-0 at one point. Game 4, I think, was 4-0, if I remember correctly. Again, another shutout. So it's without any goals, you're not winning that game anyway. Game 6, we've talked about this before. Marchand's goal, that first shot he takes, where it's from the hash marks, and I remember as he was lining up the shot, I'm we need a save on this. It was a great shot over the blocker side, but you need the save there. And then he gave up a couple more goals. He got yanked in the first. That one I do if we're gonna nitpick on the games, that one's on Lou. But they got shut out at home in Game 7.
Some of their wins, they won 1-0.
Yes,
2-1-0. Run support here.
Yeah, exactly. The team was pretty and again, for me, I don't hold this series as the deciding point in Luongo's jersey retirement argument. I feel it's for me, it's blatantly obvious that his number should be up in the rafters. He's a first ballot Hall of Fame goalie, of which we have 1, Roberto Luongo, and they really needed perfection in that series to win because of how good Thomas was and how injured that team was at that point. They weren't going to be able to beat them the same way they beat San Jose, where they kind of massacred them basically. But I believe that.
I just think that's a weak argument to hold against Luongo that, okay, they didn't win the Cup in 2011. So take down 22 and 33 from the rafters then.
Yeah.
If you want to play that game.
Yeah. And I mean, one could argue, and here's where I tread into dangerous waters as a Canucks fan. Stan Smeel and Trevor Linden are not players whose numbers get retired by most franchises. I'm glad they're up there because I'm a Canucks fan, and those two guys, like Smeel is like, Stan Smeel is like the face of the team in the 80s. Linden's the face of the team in the 90s. These are two guys who won't have to pay for a drink for the rest of their... And the thing with Bure was like the spicy exit from the team in the late 90s, which was, the relationship was mended in the early 2010s. Mm-hmm. That's why his number's up there now, right? But, Linden and Smeel are two guys who won't have to pay for a drink for the rest of their lives in the city of Vancouver, right?
Smeel's number was retired in 94, I think, or 95.
Something like that, yeah.
His was retired in the 25th anniversary of the Canucks. Mm-hmm.
Because they didn't have any numbers.
Because they were like, well, we've been around for 25 years and we should retire a number because we're this old. So whose number can we retire?
And this is actually another argument. Some people say that they have too many up there, and it's just like, well, Luongo's not like the bottom of the pecking order though, in terms of like who should or shouldn't be up there. It really, like, if we're going to be cold and cynical about it, it's like Bure, Henrik, Daniel, Luongo, then Naslund, in my opinion. And then Linden, and then Smeel. If we're talking about how good these players were, I get that the Canucks, because of their mediocre history, it's like a heart over sort of accomplishment type of organization, and Linden and Smeel embody that. I'm glad they're up there. Like, I should emphasize that, but you can't exclude Luongo when he's better than some of the players, and again, I'm comparing a goalie to skaters, but he's better than some of the players who are up there. So
this is the issue you run into when there's not really a criteria for jersey retirement.
Right.
The Canucks don't really, as far as I know, like, there's not really, it's just like, he should have his number retired, he shouldn't.
It's by feel. It's based on feel, for
so,
sure.
And of course I'm an Oilers fan, so whatever, but I like the way the Oilers do it, which is, obviously you have to have played with the Oilers long enough
a
to...
substantial amount of time.
Not necessarily a majority of your career, or even a plurality, but you have to have played with the Oilers long enough to have your number retired.
You have to be a meaningful Oiler.
It's not going to be like Chris Pronger.
No, you have to be a meaningful Oiler, right?
That's a good way of putting it. Meaningful Oiler. And you have to be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
So
for them, that's great criteria. There's so many.
Unless you make the Hall of Fame, you're not getting your number retired. Yeah. So people complain about why Ryan Smith's probably pretty comparable to Trevor Linden.
Smith would be retired in Vancouver if he had done the same time in Vancouver. Right. I think probably.
And there's people, even Oiler fans, I guess mostly Oiler fans, who complain that his number's retired.
Well, they love Ryan Smith.
They love Ryan Smith. He's a fan favorite, and he's the local boy. And
he would be the Oilers' Ring of Honor, right? Like,
the Oilers do have a Ring of Honor,
right? They have their own version of it.
He's in it now, I think, as of last year.
Yeah, of course.
Which I don't agree with the Ring of Honor, but that's a whole other.
I was going to say that's its own controversy, is having a separate sort of guild.
I don't really like that, but that's fine.
It is what it is.
I actually went to the Ring of Honor game. The game against the Rangers last Thursday was the Ring of Honor game where Doug Waite and Charlie Huddy got inducted, and it's like, oh wow, okay, that's great.
Yeah.
But
more accolades, right? More accolades. Yeah.
That was just an excuse to get the alumni back together and whatever. And
the Oilers love their old boys.
I met Doug Waite the next night, so I was like,
wow.
okay, this is fine.
Classic Taylor.
But anyway, point being is that with the Oilers, it's like, no, you have to be, and it's true. Unless you make the Hall of Fame, you will not have your number retired by the Oilers.
Right.
That's why Kevin Lowe had to wait like 20 years or whatever from the time he retired to when he made the Hall of Fame. Then the Oilers retired his number next year.
They need to amend the Constitution of North America's major countries to get him in the Hall of Fame.
And Glenn Anderson, similar thing. He didn't make the Hall of Fame for like 7 or 8 years after he retired.
Right.
He didn't have his number retired by the Oilers until that time.
Yeah.
So that would solve a lot of problems. And so with that in mind, if I was a Canuck fan, what I would want, perish the thought of me being a Canuck fan, but if I was, Sedins, both of them, Bure, Luongo. And that's it. Naslund, you were great. I think you won a scoring title. Captain of the team.
Almost did.
Okay, almost did.
Almost did.
Captain of the team. He was star player.
You won a Lester Pierce.
Thanks for coming out. Yeah. We appreciate you playing for the Canucks. Yeah. There's no reason to have 19 in the rafters, in my opinion.
Right.
Right. There's no reason to have 16. And what did Smeel wear? 22.
12. He wore number 12.
Okay, I don't know.
22
22,
is Daniels.
yeah, of course, right.
Jesus. God.
12. Okay, so there you go. There, in my opinion, there's no reason to have those guys in the rafters. They weren't, and if anyone asks why, they weren't good enough.
Yeah, it's the cold logical approach. And I'm all the numbers that are up there, I'm totally fine with it. I just think Luongo should be one of them. He's going to the Ring of Honor. It's going to be tough for me to tune in to that game. Dude, sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry. I don't want to cut in on this. Is talking about Canucks. In my opinion, it's absurd that they're not retiring Luongo's number. I was shocked when I heard that they were putting him in the Ring of Honor. Like, if I was Luongo, and I mean he's a great guy and everything, I wouldn't even show up. I'd be like, screw you guys.
Well, and here's the thing:
he's the best goalie in franchise history by a mile and a half. First ballot, like you said, first ballot Hall of Famer. What's the criteria for getting your number retired as a goaltender in Vancouver? You have to be better than Luongo was. Okay, well, good. So they're never going to retire goalie's number in Vancouver.
It's almost like.
And what they could have done.
Here's the thing. Sorry, go ahead.
They could have done what the Habs have done a couple times, and the Habs have way too many numbers. They're going to be in triple digits someday.
Well, again, the Yankees of the NHL,
but
right?
What the Habs did a couple times is there was a guy that they wanted to retire his number, but there was another player who was also meaningful to the team that wore the same number previously. Same night, they retired both numbers. Like, they retired the one number for both guys.
Right.
They could even have done that. They could have said, Luongo, we're retiring your number, but McLean, we respect what you did for the team, and we're going to put your number up there in the rafters as well.
Yeah, I mean...
Not saying that that's what... In my opinion,
it's an option.
They shouldn't do that. They should just retire Luongo's number, period. But that to mitigate or to, alleviate some of the concerns that people had, put McLean's number up there as well. If you need to. But it's crazy to me that
and this is how I feel like I literally, to quote Derek Zoolander, or rather to quote Mugatu from the Zoolander masterpiece, I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. Because I talk to people and they're just so sure that it shouldn't happen. And to me, it reflects, I think, a bitterness and a resentment. And if you're asking me, I have a feeling Luongo's on board with it. Like, I don't think he has a great relationship with this organization.
Right.
It's passable, and this is something that's been agreed to. He'll be there. I'm sure it'll be a good night. I might not watch the game.
Really?
I might not watch the ceremony. I don't know if I'll be able to because and again, this is the personal part of it for me. I grew up watching predominantly the Luongo Sedin era. For me, it's like a package deal, man. It's like Luongo and the Sedins were the reason that team was good. Was excellent, really, for a good 3, let's say 3 years. Is probably the best way to describe it. They were an excellent team for about 3 years. And his number should be up there. And, I don't know. That's what it boils down to. I probably don't have a whole lot else to say about it. But yeah, I would say, I guess to sum it up, if you don't think Luongo's number should be up there, I do believe that you're incorrect. Those people I believe they're wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But it is, I'm not going to. I did say to you before that it would permanently affect my status as a fan, and it does. It does. Like, I'm not rooting for any other team, but I'll be that guy who's like, I'm going to hold it against this organization forever that they didn't retire.
I don't get it. Like, to what end exactly? He's
not a real Canuck, Taylor. He didn't win he wasn't the Messiah he was promised to be. He didn't win the cup. It's his fault. He doesn't get his number up there.
So then the Canucks shouldn't have any retired numbers, right? I mean, if we're going down that route, Bure failed in '94 to bring the cup to Vancouver. The Sedins failed in 2011.
Hey man, I wish I could explain it to you. Like, to me it always seemed so obvious. The man was a Heritage Classic away from basically finishing his career as a Vancouver Canuck.
Right.
One could argue.
Yeah,
I think that's probably a simplification because it takes more than just that.
That was the end of that whole team, though, right? Like,
yes.
that was that day was kind of the end of that era.
The dream was dead. The dream was dead after that, for sure.